conversation that I love to bring up quite a lot is the nature and nurture experiments. And for anyone that doesn't know, I will explain it to you. Basically, you have nature and you have nurture. Nurture is how you basically grew up, your culture, your environment growing up, stuff like that. And then that's your nurture. And your nature is basically whoever your parents are and your genetics and whatever. And it's basically saying what has more of an effect, who your parents are and genetics and stuff like that, or the way you were brought up culture wise, things around you growing up and stuff like that. What matters more? When I came across this study when I was probably about 15, I was like, whoa, this is pretty dark, because what they did was they would get twins. They would basically split them up at birth, and they'd put one in a fairly richer family and one in a fairly lower income family. Obviously, that doesn't mean, a hell of a lot, right? One has more money, one doesn't, right? But they're two different families nevertheless. And they'd let them grow up, and they're basically to see, are they alike or are they different, right? And if they are different, it would probably lean to more the nurture side, and if they were similar, it'd be the nature side. There is another idea as well called the introspective perspective or something like that. I forget what it is, but it basically says that both things have a role, right? Genetics allow you to have like a blueprint, but unless you're exposed to certain things within your blueprint, you can't build off it. So let's say your dad is, a jazz player and your mum sings. You might have the blueprint to, be a musician or something within music. But then let's say you have that blueprint, but you never get exposed to learning it or even seeing it. The likelihood that you'll get into music is very rare. But if you did, you'd probably be quite talented at it. There have been loads of studies, some swing to nature, some swing to nurture. But from my experience personally, I think nature has a lot to do with who you are. I've seen it within my own family, where we have one mum and there's 5 of us, and we are all very different in our own way. And I think that's more to do with us all having pretty much different dads besides my younger 2 siblings. We are all very, very different in the way we think, act, and we were all brought up in the same house with the same person. So our nurture was the exact same, but we all sort of turn out really, really different. And I believe that is because we all have different fathers. So we all had we had this blueprint here, but the blueprint here was always different for every single time. So our blueprints were completely different. I also think we didn't get exposed to a lot of things on the nurture side at all. So it was like we were just sort of stuck with this blueprint. We didn't know what to do with it. I think over a lot of the experiments I've seen and the way they do it, I think they're kind of missing one point, right? Now, if you have a mom and dad, if you have someone that looks after you, even, you're adopted or whatever, or even your mom or dad, whatever, whoever's looking after you, you love them to bits, but you probably know, or if you don't, some people don't, but even if you love them to bits, you know that there's something they do that really annoys you or really upsets you, right? Whatever it may be, a lot of people vow to themselves that they'll never do that to their kid, right? Maybe it's they don't have emotional conversation, maybe they don't support you, maybe they don't, whatever it is, right? No one's perfect, so your parent has a flaw, your person that looks after you has a flaw, and you'll probably vow that you won't do that to your kids and you'll give them that support. And so where I'm going with this is desire, right? I think that nature and nurture definitely have a part to play, both these things, right? But I also think desire comes into it. Let's say your dad drinks every day, and from that you have a very bad experience. You're probably, not all the time, of course, some people go into drinking, but I think a lot of people would then say, okay, I'm never going to drink, right? Especially if they're young, they can understand what's affecting their dad, why they're doing it. Okay, I'm never going to drink. That brings in desire, right? If that desire was never there, let's say they wasn't raised by their dad, they might not see the damage that alcohol could do to someone with that blueprint. So then they might drink and they might fall into that thing as well. And so desire has a lot to do with it, and I think that only comes from nurture, because from your nurture you get to experience, whether you've had a good life or a bad nurture, you have two different perspectives. Even if you have a good nurture, your desires are going to be different, right? And I think that has a big part to play in what you want to do, right? In life, and that doesn't mean that your life is going to be completely different to your parents just from this one desire. But I think it has a big part to play, and I think it can go down a road where it's like completely different, right? My dad was a swimmer, and I don't even remember a time I couldn't swim. Right, I remember I don't remember it, but I remember getting told that the first bath I ever took, I fell asleep in. Water was always really peaceful to me. It was always something that I could do, and very easily as well. I never remember not being able to swim, and that was a blueprint reinforced by my dad. So I had the blueprint, which he had from his own mother, and it's like a blueprint that's been passed down, and it was reinforced. So naturally, even now, even when I was really unhealthy, when I was fat, I was a really good swimmer, with really no training, honestly. Most people that I knew that could swim, they practiced, they had trained. If we had taken a race together, most of the time I beat them without any training, without anything, because it was, I feel, something that I was just naturally good at, but only because my dad sort of passed it down and taught me it, which I don't think a lot of people appreciate enough. Your mum and dad don't have to have these talents, right? But there are things they're good at, and just because they're good at it, they can pass that blueprint down to you, and when they teach you it, it just comes a little bit easier. Obviously, it's not the case all the time, but it's a good part of you. I think a lot of people don't like to accept that nature has a lot to do with who you are as a person. People don't want to be like their mum or like their dad, especially if they don't like them or they're bad. But for me, again, with that desire, remember, if there is a part of your mum or your dad that you don't want to be like, you have the choice. It might be hard for you to not be like them in certain regards, but you have the desire. So no matter what nature or nurture says to you, you have the desire to not do that thing or not to be like that. And science can't really tell you anything about that, because it's built up over time. It's willpower, it's mentally being strong and pushing forward every single day to change that. When I was younger, I had a wicked anger, really, like I just blow up, right? You ask anyone that met me before I was probably like 12, they will tell you I was a bomb just ticking, and I would blow up at any point. I identified that was something that my mum was definitely passed down to me, and I really didn't like being angry, because every time I was angry, I would mess up. There was countless times where my anger got me to be so upset There was times where I remember one time my sister got me a jumper. I was angry. I ripped it in half. I remember a poster I had. I got angry. I ripped it up. Sad. I remember I'd done a piece of work at school, which was rare for me, and I got a spelling wrong. I ripped it up. That happened way more than I care to admit, especially when I was younger. My anger was unmatched. It was really something that was horrendous. And I learned, luckily I got to learn to control my anger, but it only came from the desire of not being like my mum. I saw my mum be angry so many times, and I didn't want to be like that. I really, really didn't. But let's say I was never raised by my mum. I may have had that anger, but never the desire, you know? And I think that desire to not want to be angry was a big part to play in who I became. Because now, damn, I couldn't even remember a time I was angry. You know, I think in the past 10 years, I could probably count on my hands how many times I've been angry. You know, it very, very rarely ever happens now. It's not even something I think about. But again, it's that desire, and I guess it's always here as well. It's just telling me, remember why, the desire to not be like that. I was telling this to someone, you know, talking about how nature probably has maybe a little bit more to do with it, but nurture has its role, and they probably both play a part, let's be real. And they were like, I was telling them about the experiment, one of the poorer household, one of the rich, and he said, well, what's that, who cares, right? That's like not even that big a difference, just money, right? And I thought, yeah, that is crazy. Could you imagine one kid in a poor household with abusive parents, and one kid in a rich family with really nice parents that support them and all this? Imagine the difference it makes, right? We when they did the experiments of what I'm talking about, the difference would have been like this. But reality is like, when you go to the absolute extremes, the difference would be unparamount. Being exposed to violence at a young age affects the brain a lot. And people don't realize how big a difference this really makes. In adult life, it will creep into your brain, and you don't realize how much of an impact it really has. Especially if you've not lived it, but also the people that have lived it don't know how it is without it. So trying to put it, the only way you can really put it is on a piece of paper, right? To sort of one person explain how they feel without the violence of as a child, and one with. And how many times in life do people come across each other that have had those types of different lives and actually talk about it? Like, barely ever, right? So we don't really, like, yeah, we know we can do studies and take questionnaires and stuff, but how many times does that really get across to people, like how much of an impact it really has? I think about this a lot, because imagine you go to, now, before I say this, everyone has equal value, but not everyone has equal ability, right? So when I say this, take it with a grain of salt, not trying to be mean at all. If I went to a certain place where the IQ was pretty low and the mental health wasn't great, maybe an area, and I took two people and they had a kid from that area or that place that has been seen to be quite depressive and quite low IQ, low motivation, all these types of things, right? And they had a kid. And we put that kid aside here, and we got someone from a really nice area where intelligence and people doing things is happening all the time, constantly, with this genetic pool, right? And you get that kid. You have one kid that has gotten very unlucky and one that has gotten very lucky with their gene pool and nature, and so both things, right? I wonder that how much of a difference, again, if you put the kid that got very lucky in a very abusive household with no money, struggle galore, and you put the kid that has been pretty unlucky genetically into a very nice household where he gets support extracurricular with extra like help with school, and he has everything at his fingertips. I wonder how much of a difference that would make, because I wonder if they would kind of match up at the end of their life, or if this one would just stay up here and this one would, like, you know, I don't know. It really does make me think. And I think, I'll be honest, I personally think they would level out, which is kind of crazy, because normally if you have a good genetic pool, a lot of the times your parents have probably done pretty right, and well, not all the time obviously, but you know, if your parents are smarter, healthier, haven't been traumatized as kids, not all the time, but a lot of the time they're going to do better, right? If you took a survey, right, and then vice versa, right? If your parents are not as intelligent, not as smart, and have been exposed to violence and trauma, they're probably not going to do as good of a job, unfortunately. And for me, I feel like genetically I was this kid, right? But I also genetically I was this kid, but I got lucky enough to be exposed to swimming, and so the kids that had this extra help and support, it kind of balanced out. And that's kind of crazy to think about, just because my dad made me swim and he was good at it, and my grandmother was good at it, that I was good at it, just because of that. Just luck. It's just luck. I mean, I don't know how many of you can relate to this, but yeah, it's a conversation I always love having. It is so intriguing to see how much of a difference your environment makes, or who your parents are. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.